Welcome to the Everyday Miracles podcast, where real life stories of hope and inspiration are shared. Every day, miracles are happening all around us, yet we rarely hear anything about them. Why is that? I'm Julie Hedenborg, and I've committed my time and energy to bring these stories to you, including some of my own personal experiences. My hope is that you'll be impacted the same way that I was. Join me in my journey to inspire change in a world that so desperately needs it. Hey everybody, welcome back. I am beyond excited today. I have a really special guest. I was able to meet her in person months back, and she's here with me today. Her testimony, I got to hear her share it in front of a group of people with all the restrictions, of course, being honored safely. She brought the whole room up on their feet. I don't think there was a dry eye. This testimony is just beyond powerful. You're just going to love this today. You're going to be so blessed. So I have Rebecca Bender with me today. And a little bit about Rebecca. She is the CEO and founder of the Rebecca Bender Initiative. She is a mom. She is a lover of Jesus. She is a graduate of the Bethel Seminary with a degree in Christian thought. She is an author. She has, I didn't know you had 2 books. I have the one book that I've read. It's called In Pursuit of Love. And it's a woman's journey from trafficked to triumphant. And it is amazing, amazing. And she has a second book called Roadmap to Redemption. So welcome, Rebecca.
Yay, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me. My first book is a self-published workbook that really is for survivors that are trying to figure out their next path to healing. So most people haven't heard of that one. It's totally fine.
Okay. Well, I kind of stalked you on the internet. I told you. So today, Rebecca's going to share with us her personal testimony. She had fairly typical upbringing, and I'll let her share all of that. But she was brainwashed and trapped at this point in her life when she was young and had dreams and was very vulnerable. And for 6 years, she was trafficked. She was sold across the underground world of sex trafficking in Las Vegas. She was branded physically. That blows my mind. Beaten. She was told where to sleep, what to wear. She was traded between traffickers. Even in the midst of her exploitation, though, God began revealing himself to her, and she found the hope that she needed to survive. After a federal raid, Rebecca escaped. Her life was forever changed as she felt the embrace of her Heavenly Father guiding her to healing and wholeness. Rebecca soon began to use her own experiences to change the lives of others, and she went back into the darkest places she had known in Las Vegas. And she assisted the FBI, Vice, and law enforcement across the country and in some of their most difficult cases. Today, Rebecca is an award-winning thought leader, advocate, speaker, and consultant with a master's degree in Christian thought. I think I said that already, but and years of insight on industry best practices. She has trained and equipped well over 100,000 professionals, individuals, agencies, and organizations to identify human trafficking in their own backyards. Mm-hmm. She is also the founder of Elevate Academy, the largest online school for human trafficking, serving nearly 800 survivors in 368 locations across the country and around the world. And
we broke 400 cities this year. This month, we had 402 cities.
Oh my goodness.
Survivors are in getting services and career lessons. And yeah, it's so cool. It's crazy.
God.
Every time you read a line, I'm thinking, is that me? Are you sure? I can't even imagine.
Well, a list of accomplishments that you have and recognized by Congress and all the awards, it would take too long. But if you could just open up, share a little bit about how God moved in all of this. You have so much to offer with obviously the resources with all of the human trafficking awareness, but I'm so interested in having you share the part about how God moved in your life.
Yeah, my story, really it's the Lord's story of redemption. I can remember something happened that was just shocking, and I was like, really, God, me? And the Lord's like, Like, don't get it confused. This isn't about you. This is about me and my story of redemption. And that was a good reminder, I think, for all of us. It's like God wants to share his ability to redeem and transform, even, in any parts of our lives. That I obviously am a survivor of trafficking. Not everyone can relate with that, but I think we all can relate with moments of feeling trapped, or not knowing what to do, or how do I get out of this, or shame or embarrassment, or I made a mistake and I regret it and I wish I could take it back. We all have those. And God is so great about redeeming every single one of those things for us. And I'm just so grateful that he chose to for me too. And that I leaned into it. I think that's the other part. We all have human agency, right? Moses had to throw down his staff. He had to physically pick up the snake. He had to go to Pharaoh. Like, we have human agency in this call with the Lord. And so it does take faith to kind of step out and say, I think I heard him and I'm going to give it a shot. And one thing I love too, I'll just say this, is I can remember being nervous once, like, well, what if I'm getting it wrong, Lord? What if this isn't you? And I felt this feeling of, is God going to punish me because I'm trying to hear his voice? Like, even if I get it wrong, he's not going to be like, that's it. He's like, wow, I'm so proud of you for trying to be obedient. And he still works it out and figures it out. And it's like, so it's okay if you're not hearing it right. Try anyway. He's going to really honor your obedience. And I just love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you can take us back, I know you were in high school and your life looked very, I guess, typical. You had dreams. Your family, you said at one point that they didn't really have a solid faith. You had a praying grandmother, but your family wasn't necessarily anchored in a faith,
Right.
Strongly. So talk a little bit about how God moved. So yeah, just bring us back to when you were a high school student. You were getting ready to graduate early.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I would have never been put in an at-risk youth category, kind of your all-American small town girl. I mean, I had issues like any kid with vulnerabilities. My parents were not walking with the Lord at all. They'd party on the weekends. I can remember being little, maybe, 9-ish, and we'd go to a friend's house and I'd sit in the back room with the kids and we'd all play Nintendo and Atari, if that dates me. While my parents, got drunk in the living room with their friends. And that was just kind of my upbringing. It was pretty volatile home. My dad started drinking a lot. My mom had her own trauma she was working through from her own childhood. And they just didn't model healthy relationships for me, healthy anything, healthy boundaries, healthy conversations. And so I grew up still with vulnerabilities. After their divorce, I'm an only child. I felt very alone, very unwanted. My dad would pick me up for visitation and drive to the bar, and I'd sit in the car for hours while he would go in and drink. I can remember going and walking to a payphone and calling 1-800-COLLECT to have my mom come get me because it had been so long. And I mean, those aren't horribly abusive. It's neglectful, absolutely. But that was kind of the extent of my trauma. So by the time my mom had gotten remarried, and my stepdad is amazing, and they're obviously doing so well today, but life kind of became normal again by high school. Was really active in sports, always really active in sports. I was a varsity athlete. I played soccer for our 6A high school, which is a really big high school. So I was their varsity goalie. I also ran track. I played basketball. I mean, I played a lot of sports. Soccer was my main one, but I played lots of sports. I was harvest ball queen, which meant I got a rubber chicken because they voted for the funniest girl of the year. I never got a crown. I'll never forget. I'm like sitting there in your flannel top. You guys all know, if you've seen a harvest photo, it's harvest ball, right? So you're in your flannel top with jeans, and I'm like on the side with the rubber chicken. It's the cheesiest photo ever. But kind of a normal kid. I didn't have red flags. I was still a party girl. I'd go to bonfires and drink a beer like anyone else in the back of a pickup truck. I wanted to be a part of things. I was gregarious and liked to be involved in stuff. And that was used kind of probably against me later on when anytime moments of feeling really alone surfaced, I found ways to be a part of things. And sometimes that's not always with the best crowd or the ones that are the healthiest for us. And if you don't have really good influences in your life, sometimes that can put us at risk to join groups that might be, a little less healthy. So that's kind of my upbringing in a nutshell. But graduated high school a year early. My junior year, I had enough credits and I was accepted into Oregon State University. I had my dorm room assigned and I was excited to get out of my small town and go off to college. And I wanted to be an architect was my final, more realistic goal. Originally, I think I share in the book, I wanted to be on Saturday Night Live, but that didn't play out. Although I'm still taking calls if Tina Fey's watching. No, I'm kidding. But I went to that summer, I ended up getting pregnant and I decided to keep my daughter and give up my dorm room and stay in my small town and go to community college. And that was real hard for me at 17, now just turned 18 having the baby, but that created more vulnerabilities, right? As a single young mom, that put another kind of notch on the belt of what we would call a high ACEs score, that adverse childhood experiential study. That's the term ACEs. For those of you that are listening that are into like social work and whatnot, that's kind of what we look for. If someone has high ACEs, we know they're really at risk for exploitation. And so my ACEs, obviously we don't know what those are back in those days, but they continued to grow. And then when I was off at, I ended up moving out of my small town and moved into an apartment where my friend had an extra bedroom near a college campus. They were all going to college. And that's when I met a guy who seemed to have all the answers, and he was funny and he took an interest in my daughter. And I think it was the family dynamic that broken 9-year-old me really was desperate for, and that I really wanted for my little girl. I didn't want her to have some of the heartaches that I had remembered as a young person. And so, love is blind, and there's definitely some red flags, but I didn't see them back then. And he ended up not being who he said he was. He ended up being a trafficker. And it's one thing that I think is so crucial when we're talking about this issue is I grew up in the same community as all of you. So I too pictured human trafficking as kidnapped kids in white minivans being thrown in dirty basements, chained to radiators overseas, right? And when my boyfriend isn't fitting any of those scenarios, I didn't know I was being trafficked. I didn't know I was stepping in quicksand. I just thought that eventually I thought I was in domestic violence, but I had no frame of reference for what trafficking really looked like in a developed domestic community and neighborhood like my own.
Mm-hmm. And you did a beautiful job in the book of kind of explaining how all this played out, and reading it like this could happen. This could have happened to anyone.
Yeah.
6 months of kind of brainwashing you and falling in love with your daughter. And you had this idea that he was this producer and you were and then moving to Las Vegas, and then the way it all kind of unraveled, and then to be in the position where and I will let you tell that part, but he had your daughter. He put you in a position where he's telling you to do something and your daughter is with someone. And that, as a mom, that took my breath away reading that part.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I say often trafficking is very rarely kidnapping. Actually, according to the FBI, it's less than 1%. But trafficking is a gradual expansion of boundaries and an increase in trust. And so if we want to really talk to our kids about trafficking, we need to talk to our sons about the hypersexual world and what that can really do to their brains. We need to talk to our daughters about just boundaries. Let's not wait till it gets to an emergency stranger danger moment. Let's talk about when someone just barely begins pressuring you to do things that make you uncomfortable. Like, let's just start there. Let's draw the line a little further back with our kids. I don't want you to wait until it's too late. I want you to know what to do when you feel uncomfortable at a high school party, when an older boy puts his hand on your leg, or a grown man and you're a 13-year-old. What do you do? How do you respond? No, you're not going to get in trouble. All of those things it's almost like we teach them to look at the very last warning sign instead of the very first warning sign, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's good. Now, part of what I love about your book, I actually think your book is a love story because of the way, just the relentless love of God for us, and the way he just came when you were at your deepest, darkest point. Can you talk a little bit about how you, I guess we're jumping ahead, but going into the Victory rehab place you want to.
Victory Outreach.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. I mean, you're right. It is a love story. And that's why, you know, we finally, after months of being really indecisive on a title, went with In Pursuit of Love, because it was like my pursuit of love, which I didn't know was really, you know, I was searching for something that just tried to fill a hole in my heart. And really the whole time God was pursuing me. And I just love that, you know, like the song says, you can't run, he's going to find you, as he kicked down the walls to find you. Just so great. But I was being trafficked. I had gotten to Las Vegas. The guy I thought was my boyfriend was not who he said he was. I found out that everything was kind of a fraud. Everything was a con. Started to kind of have the rug pulled out from under me, so to speak. And yet there was, like domestic violence, there was moments of still honeymoon phases and kind of leading me on a little. And so it's like, this doesn't seem right, but something's off, but he loves. And so it's really confusing for a young person, especially. And then, you know, he had, like you said, he had taken my daughter. And so there were moments when I thought, I just need to get through this and get home to my baby, and everything will be better tomorrow. And I just kind of kept telling myself that until tomorrow doesn't come, and things were different, and it changes. And so I started using drugs to mask my emotions and my embarrassment and my shame and my sadness, really, my real intense sadness. And he'd become very violent during that time. He had you know, hurt me on several occasions. And my mom knew something was off, but she didn't know trafficking. It wasn't even a word that people really were using back then. And so she just thought drugs were my problem. And so she came to Vegas and she took my daughter, told me I wouldn't get her back until I turned my life around. And she gave me a list of rehabs. And there was one on there that was a Christian rehab. And I said, I'm not going to no Christian rehab. These Christians don't have a clue what life on the streets is like. That's what I thought. And nowhere had vacancy except the Christian rehab. And so it was there that I was radically saved and delivered from drugs at the altar in a blink of an eye, heard the voice of God for the first time. I was just so radically changed by him. And I can remember this moment when I'm first starting to get to know the Lord. And I was in prayer, and I had a memory of sitting on the floor of our kitchen when my trafficker had hit me, and I had blood on my face. And I can remember he hit me and he left. And I slumped to the kitchen floor, and I can remember wiping my mouth and seeing blood on my hand and thinking, why won't he love me? Like, what more can I do to make him love me? I'm done everything he's asked. I've endured all of this awfulness. Like, why won't he love me? What more can I do? And that's when the Lord in that moment reminded me, and he said, that's how I feel about you. What more can I do? I've died on a cross. I've been bloodied and battered. I've given up everything. Like, what more can I do to make you love me? And I just remember feeling kind of like heartbroken for Jesus, that I didn't realize I could grieve the heart of God. It was the first moment that I had that revelation that I could grieve him. I could break his heart. And I would never want him to feel the way that my trafficker made me feel. And I don't know, there's a real epiphany kind of moment in my walk with the Lord.
That page brought me to tears. There's 2 places in your book I was wrecked. So can you continue to share a little more about how your faith started to change as you were there?
Yeah, I mean, I just got on fire for Jesus. I started realizing that I had purpose and destiny, and I was, you know, preaching at youth events and just on fire for the Lord. I could not get enough of the word. I wanted to know the Greek and the cultural contextualization, and I didn't know the words at the time, right? I wanted to do an exegesis on the setting, and all this just couldn't get enough concordances and almanacs. I just loved the word so much. And this rehab, which did what it's supposed to do, deliver, help someone get clean. It wasn't a specialized center for human trafficking victims. And so it didn't have trauma-informed therapy, and it didn't have ways to identify trauma bonding and Stockholm syndrome and capture bonding and all of the things that we know now that specialized services need. It's almost like if you break an arm and you send someone to get a sling, it'd probably be better in a cast. It might need an x-ray, it might need reset, it might need a screw. And will it get better in a sling? I mean, sure, but it's not going to get how it really could be, right? And that's why I think specialized services are so important, because it really takes a certain type of trauma. Trafficked victims go through what's called complex compound trauma. It means multiple perpetrators and multiple incidents. It's unlike one perpetrator and multiple incidents, or one incident and one person, or one incident and no person, like car wreck or air fire, or right. So there's all these different varying forms of trauma on a spectrum. And so people who have been trafficked experience what people call complex compound, which means multiple events and multiple perpetrators. And so it's a really type of specialized treatment. And the rehab didn't offer that. And not because they were bad, they were fabulous. I love them. I'd recommend anyone to go there if they need help with drugs and substance abuse. But it didn't address some of the areas that I didn't even know existed in me. And so after about 1.5 years in rehab, I went back to my boyfriend. I thought, he had really had me convinced that drugs were the reason. At first it was this, and there's all these things that you're dangling carrot, and the last one was drugs. And now that I didn't have drugs, I thought he'd love me. And so I went back clean and sober to tell him, about Jesus, and thinking it would all be better. Oh, lying devil.
Now, and you also you talk about this in the book, but the sister wives that you had, that were your friends that you really cared about, were you able to share Jesus with them when you came back? Were they kind of open to it?
I didn't have wife-in-laws until the next trafficker after I went back. And I did talk to the Lord about them a little bit. And they did with me. But it was also, it's an interesting setting when you're living in a home with a whole bunch of other women and you're all being trafficked. You develop bonds over other things, and you develop a lot of trauma bonds, much like soldiers at war. And it's hard to leave them as much as it is the trafficker. And there's other types of bonding there. But what was interesting was having kind of like a very much a cult-like mentality where you have guilt to leave other survivors behind. And so you end up staying, even if you can physically run, you think, but what about the other kids? And I can't leave them. And what about her? And I don't want to, it's just all this really complex, nuanced psychology that I just don't think most people realize. Heck, you don't even realize it when you're going through it. You think you're too smart to be brainwashed. That doesn't happen anymore. But radical religious groups and cults exist, and traffickers use those very same tactics to mentally control their victims.
Mm-hmm. Now, it took you, is it 4 times you tried to leave? It was the 4th time that you actually got out?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to remember. I think about 4. Who knows? Could have been more.
So it's, you go through all this healing, and your book is wonderful at kind of describing like the real view of what all you had to go through. You did a beautiful job walking through that, because I cannot imagine, after everything that you experienced, what that was like. And meeting Matt and everything, kind of God just moving in a beautiful way. You're hearing the voice of God more and more. So now you're at a point where you're going back to this area, and you're working with the FBI and people. You're on the other side. I mean, this was risking your life, right? I mean, what was that like for you?
In the beginning of starting to just barely share my story, I was actually really nervous to have my real name known. I would do articles with an alias. I would say photos of me couldn't be used. You're so still engulfed with fear that they'll find you, that they will come after you. The threats seem very valid. They weren't empty threats. They had done that. He had shown up in my house at Grants Pass, Oregon to find me. He did make threats. And he acted on some of those threats in multiple occasions. And so it's a real valid fear. And so for a while I didn't share who I really was. I was desperately afraid, not just of him too, but then I also was afraid of how other people would view us in our small community. I thought, what if my daughter's friends' parents don't let them come over anymore because they know what kind of girl I used to be? Or what if my husband's co-workers give him crap about his wife used to be a prostitute? Things like that are so paralyzing. Fear is like cancer to the Christian, right? It's like cancer to anybody, really, but fear is paralyzing for people, and I really struggled with that. But once I started doing some trainings, even you didn't put them out in the public a lot. You just started to do trainings, and I started having really organic relationships with law enforcement. I thought, I wish he would try to call me now. I would call Detective Jim and we would go after him. And I started slowly gaining confidence that if God was for me, who could be against me? And I'm just going to step out and do it. And I'm shocked at what he's done. Still to this day, I'm shocked.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, I can't imagine what that was like, because you had been on the other side. You had seen people that you knew taken out in body bags. You had known some of those policemen. They knew you from when you were working. So much.
Yeah, there was a couple girls that had been murdered in the life of human trafficking. And I think that people don't realize we all want to fight trafficking. I say we all, because it's kind of a trending word right now in our culture. And when you boil it down, it's people in prostitution, whether unfortunately children, it's the issue in the systems of prostitution that bad guys are profiting off of, because sex for sale is so rampant in our culture. And what those statistics show us is that there's extremely high rates of homicide. Almost every serial killer has targeted women in prostitution because they think that no one cares about them. And so it's a really risky, very dangerous underground world. And I knew two women, not personally, we weren't like best friends calling one another, but I knew them from the escort service. One girl I ended up later on realizing who she was. I didn't at the time. And so it is really like playing Russian roulette. Every time you knock on a door or get in a car, you don't know what's going to happen. And that constant state of prolonged fear has real mental health effects on you. High anxiety, sensory overload, PTSD. Yeah, people don't realize, I think, that long-term effect of living in a constant state of fear.
Well, yeah, I can't begin to imagine that. I can't begin. One thing I wanted to ask you too, I know one of the girls that you cared so much about in the house, I think in the book you call her Brandy. She is out, she has overcome. What about the other people that were in the story with you?
Yeah, and I want to give her a quick plug. Her name is also Rebecca, which is why we changed her name to Brandy, because it would have been really hard on Audible to differentiate the Rebeccas. But Rebecca Charleston, I actually thank her in the back and address who she is. She just received a presidential pardon for her arrest in this book. Just the other December 22nd, 23rd, she was awarded a presidential pardon. Her felony is being taken off for the time she did in prison that I write about in this book. And it's just the grace of God. She's doing incredible work today. She's suing the state of Nevada for human rights violations federally. She's a force to be reckoned with too. I'm sure she'll have a book come out someday as well. I actually asked her to write this one with me, but at the time she didn't know if she wanted to be public. And so it's just God has a plan, and she's going to have lots of other things to write about when she's ready. So the other two, one does not want to be in the trafficking field at all, or the anti-trafficking field. She does not want her story known. She was able to escape. She works a normal job in a normal town. People listening may actually interact with her and you have no clue. She got remarried and she seems to be doing really well. The other girl is still being trafficked by our trafficker. And so she's still, I think I referred to her as Tori in the book. Tori is still being trafficked by him. And so it's heartbreaking, and it's really hard to get out. Tori had a really difficult childhood. I didn't write a lot about it because I didn't feel like it was my story to tell. She had a lot harder childhood than I think the rest of us. And so not a lot of support to run, nowhere to go to. That's the majority of trafficked victims in the US, right? Almost 75% of trafficked victims come out of foster care. And that's a very broad national average because every state kind of has its own number. But I mean, imagine, I'm so grateful that when I was finally able to get out for good, my mom put my plane ticket on a credit card. My family opened their doors. They watched my daughter while I tried to get a job or take placement tests at college. And 75% of victims don't have that. They have nowhere to run. They have no one to call. And that's why your local anti-trafficking nonprofit and safe home are so vital, because they get to be, and you get to be, that family and that community that these oftentimes girls just really don't have. So I'm such a supporter of our local boots on the ground nonprofits that fight trafficking, because I think they're really, really doing good work and oftentimes don't get the press. And they put all their funds to really like direct service. You should see these nonprofits work on shoestring budgets and they make it happen. And, you know, I've been one and I've done that. And I've thrown victims in my minivan and dropped my kids off at school before I could take her to her doctor appointment. And you just make it work because you care so much about the issue. So it's kind of a long answers. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. You know, and Debbie, she's the local person that I've interviewed. I've seen her do the same thing. Even in the middle of text, like, oh, someone just ran out of gas over here. I have to go help her. I got to get groceries for her. I know she has safe houses where they're able to keep people temporarily to help them. So, you know, and we are happy to help support, you know, and promote those people to help get funds because it's so important.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And then let me see here. One other question that I had, one other point in the book that I just loved so much. When you actually got delivered, you talked about, there was an episode earlier in the book where a man was strangling you. And there were a couple of times that you almost lost your life. We can't go into everything that's in the book, but that one stands out to me. And you had a sensation and you almost died, but something happened. And then there was a moment. Can you kind of talk about how God connected that for you?
Yeah. Yeah, it was such a powerful moment in my story that I still am sometimes like, you're just in awe constantly when you know, sometimes you just bury your nose down and you do the work. And then when you come up for breath and you know, it hits you, you know, all that God's done. But during my time of exploitation, I was strangled almost to death by a man who I thought was kind of, I shouldn't say I thought, he was kind of like a regular of mine. We call them regulars when you've seen someone over and over again. And oftentimes victims and traffickers want their victims to have regulars because it decreases your chance of arrest. And so, you know, it's not a cop. So, you know, regulars are a good thing. You want to build up regulars because then you can have this Rolodex instead of constantly risking going to jail. And so I had seen this person multiple times. It wasn't a new thing. And this time he got violent and he started strangling me. And I can remember feeling the weight of trying to fight, but him being so much bigger that he was just so much stronger. And I know that sounds obvious, but I don't know about anyone else, but sometimes you're like, if someone took my kid, I would just grab them and fight back. And I don't know if anyone else has had those thoughts before, but when you're actually in the moment of it and you physically can't, like you are fighting back and it's not working and they're actually stronger than you. And you start panicking of like, I can't actually get out of this. And I can remember just trying to grab at his hands. My legs were starting to collapse from under me. I felt like I was running out of air and can remember just going, like that's all I could get out. And I started crying and my vision started to go blurry and I started to see yellow stars. And I thought, this is it. My baby's not going to have a mama. And right then I felt this like shaky feeling. that I thought accompanied death. And a while later, and all of a sudden he let go. He released his hands and I jumped up and ran out of the room. And a little while later, I can't remember how long, 8 months, a year later, I don't even know. I'm in the rehab. I'm in the church, Victory Outreach, and I'm standing in prayer. It's this big window, and I can remember just closing my eyes and lifting my arms and praying. And I suddenly felt that same shaky feeling, and it kind of jolted me out of prayer a little bit. Like I pushed that back to my memory. I haven't thought about that in a long time. And I remember the Lord saying, that feeling is the feeling of life, not death. It was me who released his hands from around your neck. And I think I just dropped to my knees like, well, then my life's yours, because I shouldn't even be alive if it wasn't for you. And that's when I kind of gave my life to the Lord. And I just have said yes to any door ever since. And I don't just trust that anything is better than what's already been. So I'm in, right? That's kind of how I feel.
Well, I think you're pretty amazing. Even the fact that you're doing this right now, because I asked you and you just moved, you're in a new house.
Yeah. I'm on the floor with boxes. I mean, I'm literally on moving boxes as we're sitting here. My closet is still wet paint, so the door's open because there's a heater over there. So it's not the best background, but
no, but that's just your love for the Lord, and to share what He's done in your life is really amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, Elevate Academy, and there is a faith component to the Elevate Academy.
Yeah, we do. We have a whole bunch of classes. It's whatever students and survivors want to take. Our number one requested class is our faith-based class, though we've had all sorts of people go through Elevate, Muslim, LGBTQ, anyone who wants to come. We welcome everyone, which is what we should do. Yeah. And we let people choose, which is what trauma-informed care is about. When you take away someone's choice, it's very traumatic for people who have been trafficked. And so these are all the classes. You come as you are. We love you right where you're at. And you take whichever one you want, whether it's career exploration or how to tell your story with purpose or business management or finding your lane or deeper levels of healing, which is our faith-based option. It is our number one requested class. And that's been so great. I can remember having people of lots of faiths, me saying like, well, this is, our class is a faith-based class. And they say, I just want whatever you have, like whatever you carry, I want. And I'm like, well, okay. Well, I don't know that it's your jam, but you're welcome. And it's been cool to see what God's done in people's lives right where they're at. That's the beauty of loving people, really loving people, is He doesn't crown us Holy Spirit to like tell people what. You just got to love them and let the Holy Spirit do what the Holy Spirit does. And if you don't see the fruit in your season with them, that's okay. It's not all about us, right? Like, yeah, it's a really great way to serve others, in my opinion, but that's just me.
Well, I think that's amazing. Trying to think of any other questions. There's so many things I could ask you. I guess right now there's so many people listening that you talked about. You had a message that you shared for people that felt like their dream had been stalled, or maybe they're in a dark place and they feel like they are bound by their past, or they just need a message of hope. What would you say to a person like that?
Oh man, I think I just would encourage anyone that feels hopeless or, well, you don't know what I've been through, or maybe that's not for me, or I've already messed up too many times. I would just encourage you that God is a God of redemption, that He will turn around anything, any step you've made that you have felt is your choice, that you did it. God will still turn it around, and to not give up hope, that trying to become the person you want to be and serving the Lord in a way that just steps through any open door that He brings, you can never go wrong. And it will always be better than what it has been. It might be harder, might be more challenging. There might be hurdles along the way, lessons to explore new paths, but it'll not be worse, right? That God is going to continue to help because He's with you. And I just want to encourage people to hold on, and to any parents, especially that have kids that are lost. Just want to encourage them that God can come through. And we all have to have a testimony. There's no grandkids in heaven. Our kids aren't getting to heaven on our coattails. They have to have their own testimonies. Keep praying, keep bombarding the throne, and keep having faith that it's going to come through and it's going to work out. It's not going to be always in the time we hope, but it will work out. The number of times my mom cried her eyes out and thought that she would get a phone call and I'd be dead is a lot. And my pastor's wife told her that it's going to get worse before it gets better, because I had to hit a rock bottom. And she was right. It's really hard as a parent to live through, watching your kid hit rock bottom over and over. And yet today I'm so grateful, and she's so grateful that through that I've learned ways to help others. I've hit rock bottom so many times that now I get to paint the roadmap for the cops on where the rock bottoms are. And if I didn't have those experiences, I wouldn't have that insight to give. And so just always trying to turn it around for his honor and glory is kind of the goal.
That's excellent. Excellent. And I'm just curious, you have so many things that you do. You have your podcast, you have your academy, you're an expert witness, you're coming to rescue people at different times. Like, would you have one piece of things? What is the one thing that you do? Maybe it's your ministry, obviously you're a mom, but as far as like the other things, like what is your favorite piece that you get to do?
Oh, it's so good. I'm often stretched too thin, and saying no is a problem because I want to do it all and I love it all. And you try something and you have to try it for a little while before you realize like, oh, maybe that's not really my thing. And so it's hard because I really do just love being a part and love being involved. It's how I've been forever. And I don't think it's going to change. It's who God made me. But I really love changing culture. I love taking culturally relevant topics and helping the public, helping educate the public on how it's happening, why it's happening, taking complex issues and making it, bite-sized to be able to say it's easy to eat an elephant. It's one bite at a time, and trying to help do that with really difficult issues. We work a lot in terms of policy reform and advice. Then I'm on the National Advisory Council, which means we help advise Congress on different ways each state needs to make changes. Our report was 127 recommendations this year. The report just came out, and in 12 different categories. So I like being able to help people have a solution, right? We can do this. Look at the issue of smoking. And we changed the way America saw smoking. 30 years ago, a flight attendant would have offered you a cigarette on the plane, or your doctor would have walked in with the Marlboro in hand, right? And now we'd all be appalled at that. And so change is possible. When we look at that as a model, we see it took everybody doing something. Everybody. It took a whistleblower risking their reputation. It took pro bono lawyers showing up. It took media groups taking it on. It took advocates laying in streets in front of big tobacco offices, right, to replicate the number of people who had died. It took so many people, and change happened. And so we can't give up hope. We have to find our thing, and we have to mobilize together and believe. It might take 30 years, but we need to be in this for the long haul. This isn't going to be a quick fix. And smoking is a great model that we have to follow. So it is possible.
Excellent. Excellent. That's wonderful. I know lots of people are going to be eating this up, and I have lots of things I'm going to be attaching. I loved the Mythbusters series that you did.
Oh, cool.
So amazing. You had Underground Railroad and the disguised vice people.
I know. Crazy, right?
And the one guy said, I loved it. He said, in 12 years, not one case was kidnapped. Like, I learned a lot. I really learned a lot. So I'm going to attach all those things. But for people that want to find more from you, I'm going to do this and then we're going to pray. But where can they find you? What's the easiest place to find you?
RebeccaBender.org is the easiest place. On there, there's all the different social buttons at the bottom. If you prefer Instagram or Facebook, we're active on both. You can get right to Elevate Academy's website if you want to learn more specifically about the school and survivors that are in your state that are a part of your task force or your leadership. You can get to Elevate Academy from there. Otherwise, it's elevate-academy.org. But all of my tools and resources to educate and books and all of that is on our website, RebeccaBender.org.
Excellent. And for those of you listening, I occasionally do book giveaways. I'm going to give away 3 of her books.
Wow, yay!
Email me at everydaymiraclespodcast@gmail.com and say, I want Rebecca's book. The first 3, it has to be domestic because it gets a little expensive otherwise. But so it will bless you. I guarantee it. It was just a beautiful, beautiful book. And
thanks for your support.
Oh, yes. I'm happy to do it. And if you would you mind praying over my guests as we?
Oh, I'd be honored. Yay. Okay. Lord, thank you so much for this day. And I just thank you for each and every listener. I thank you especially for Julie and all that she's doing to help bring stories of hope and resilience and just birthing dreams into people, God. And we pray that the people that listen today to this and to all the other episodes too, God, that you would just touch each heart like a tight bud that's blossoming open. We're so grateful that you take us and you open up our hearts and our minds to see more of you in more deep, intricate ways. And we're so grateful, God, that you have a plan for each and every person that's listening, that you're no respecter of persons. What you've done for me, you can do for them, you can do for their kids. We just pray that you would go before each person and make crooked places straight. You'd move mountains on their behalf and you would open doors for them, God. Thank you. Thank you for each viewer and listener and all the things. You're so good to us. In Jesus' precious name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening today. Just amazing. If you have a miracle that you would like to share with me, please reach out to me at everydaymiraclespodcast@gmail.com, and God bless you.